What's up, Mech fans, and welcome back to the channel. So today we got a brand new episode of Mobile Suit Gundam GQuuuuuuX to talk about. This is episode number 7, titled Machu's Rebellion, and as per usual, we're going to be doing a full spoiler breakdown and review. But before we dive into that, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you're a fan of Mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. Also, while you're there, head on down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts on this episode. And without further ado, let's get into a bit of a recap. As the next clan battle looms, Amate sorties in the GQuuuuuuX and heads to a new deployment point, confusing her team. Meanwhile, Kycelia strikes a deal with Side 6's government to collaborate on the Solar Ray project. At the airlock, Amate hands the GQuuuuuuX to Nyan, planning to flee Side 6 with her and Shuji, but unfortunately Minovsky particles cut off communication as they deploy. Duz and Gates launch their suits, intending to use the clan battle to assassinate Kycelia. Amid chaos, Amate steals cash from Anki, but is confronted, fires a warning shot and escapes. The Psycho Gundam arrives, battles Nyan and damages the GQuuuuuuX, which crashes. Shuji saves Nyan, who pleads for him to leave with her, but suddenly, the Kikeroga activates and Shuji vanishes with the Red Gundam. Amate flees with the stolen cash but is cornered and escapes in the GQuuuuuuX. Meanwhile, Xavier and Shalia arrive to protect Kycelia, killing Duz and Gates. As Amate begins losing control of her powers, Shalia intervenes and disables her. Xavier recruits Nyan to Zeon, and Shalia secretly reveals plans to eliminate both Giran and Kycelia. The episode ends with Amate imprisoned, uncertain of her fate. So that should give you guys a good overview of this episode and my thoughts on it. I absolutely love this thing, and if you couldn't tell from me talking through that kind of synopsis overview of the episode, this thing was packed. There was so much going down in this episode that it was almost quite difficult to take it in on one viewing, and I don't say that in a way where they were throwing too much information at you. It was just a lot, and because there's so many big moments in this episode, there's a lot to break down here, and I'm going to try and keep it as concise as possible, but if I start rambling about stuff, then don't blame me. Ultimately, this episode is the turning point in the story where, as compared to the start of this episode, like when you're comparing the end to the start, everyone's in a very different place. Of course, we start off with everything being as it was, and then you end the episode with essentially Nyan and Amate on different sides of Zeon, really. Shuji's disappeared, Shalia's kind of motivation, if you will, is revealed. Xavier's now with Kycelia, and of course with Nyan as well. So everyone's in very different places here, and that's very exciting going into the back half of this series, because now you've almost like pitted everyone against each other in a way, where you're gonna get to see some different interactions, where you're gonna get to see Nyan interacting more with Xavier, you're gonna get to see Amate probably interacting with Shalia, and there's so much going on that's just completely shifted the dynamic of the show to the point that I think these next 4 episodes are not going to be unpredictable. You're not going to be able to see exactly like how the relationships and dynamics will play out. Obviously, the most substantial part of this whole shift in dynamic is where it places our main trio. You've got Nyan now with Shalia, so essentially on this side of Zeon, where of course Shalia's essentially got to try and take down the top heads, make Zeon implode from within in a way. So you've got Amate, who will presumably end up kind of following him and being on that side, because she doesn't really have much of a choice to do anything else. And now you've got Nyan, who's now part of Zeon. She's probably going to develop a bit of a relationship with Xavier and maybe Kycelia as well, and almost feel like she's found, her calling, feel like she's found people that she can depend on and that actually, appreciate her for everything that she does, as compared to Amate, who, kind of made it quite clear in this episode that she's more concerned with Shuji than Nyan, which ultimately has kind of broken their relationship up. So you've got 2 characters that were together and now they're on totally different sides. So inevitably, the kind of finale of this series is going to be both of those characters coming face to face, and maybe both of them in very different positions, where Amate might be seen more as the villain and Nyan seen more as the main protagonist. Add to that, you've also got Shuji, who's now disappeared. He will of course come back. Like, this is not the last we've seen of Shuji, and I'm sure they're going to try and play into that quite heavily, and I would probably expect the next episode, considering that we're going back to Universal Century, we're going to learn probably about how Shuji ends up with the Red Gundam in the first place. So there's a lot of explaining still to do, but I think they can pull it off. But one thing to note that's very, very interesting, and it's been somewhat clear throughout the series, but now it is more clear than ever, that our main trio are essentially like a reverse, gender swapped in a way, really, version of Amuro, Shah, and Lala from the original Gundam series. Because you've got like almost this character, this person that our, two of our major characters or major parts of this trio are seeing as more of a symbol than like an individual person, which is kind of how Amuro and Shah saw Lala, and they're almost both fighting for this person, but they're not fighting for them for the person that they are, but more so what they kind of represent. And that's what you've got with Shuji here. A relatively relaxed, easygoing character that's almost caught in a bit of a love triangle. And then you've got Amate and you've got Nyan in this case, and they sort of represent that like Amuro Shah thing. And especially now that they're on two different sides, Amate is, I would probably say, will fill more of that Shah role in terms of kind of going against Xeon and trying to make a better world for new types and all that kind of stuff. And then Nyan's just kind of thrown into this situation, much like Amuro was with the Federation in the original Gundam series. So they're doing a little bit of changing around and swapping, but the core values are there for this to essentially be another Amuro Shah Lala trio, which I think is a really cool idea. And again, it wasn't something that was immediately obvious, but when you look at how things have ended up by the end of this episode, and also when someone actually points it out to you, it becomes quite evident that that's what they're trying to do, and they're doing it in a way that doesn't feel like a direct copy, but you can kind of spot the signs of they're doing some really cool stuff here with characters that pays homage to the original Gundam series, more so thematically than directly like, oh, let's have this person pop up, if that makes sense. The only issue I could potentially see with the route that they've gone, where they're pitting Amate and Nyan against each other, is that, in my opinion, as it stands, that relationship has just not been developed as much as it could have been to make, that ultimate like rivalry and them kind of facing off against one another on the battlefield hit on an emotional level. Now, when it actually gets to it, depending on how it's executed, it could be really good and it could be done very well. And I think if you kind of analyze more of the subtleties with their relationship, maybe then it will hit a little bit more. But I guess more on a face value kind of thing. I just don't feel like we spent enough time with those two characters together to really feel that emotional impact when ultimately they do come face to face and fight against each other. With all that said, though, let's dive into more of the action and mobile suit stuff in this episode, which was truly top-notch. Of course, we've got the Titans here, we've got the Psycho Gundam, and man, the way that they did it in this series was so cool. Now, I can see from a certain perspective why people would have been underwhelmed by almost the lack of having the Titans in the Psycho Gundam and kind of how easily they were sort of wiped off the board. But at the end of the day, Zeta's already done that to a substantial degree. And then, of course, with Double Zeta, you've got the Psycho Gundam. So we've already done this kind of big mobile suit type thing. So you'd almost feel like it'd be like repeating just for the sake of it and stretching it out for an amount of time that it doesn't need to be stretched out for. I think they were always going to just be involved in this particular part, and it worked. Because when you see what the Psycho Gundam does in this series, the way that they've made it, that feels very much like an Evangelion, like this is the closest we've come to mobile suits within this series feeling like ABA units and taking a heavy amount of inspiration, like the way that the armor kind of splits off and it feels very much like a Third Impact kind of situation with like all the things floating around it. The interior body very much reminds me of like what we saw with the rebuild of Evangelion films. It's obviously deriving a lot from that, like from a visual standpoint. And yeah, you can definitely see the inspiration there, which works because at the end of the day, we always expected that this series to some degree would be pulling stuff from Evangelion. It's made by the Evangelion studio and Sunrise, of course, as well. So naturally there's going to be, some inspiration drawn there, and we kind of expected that from the get-go, even with the designs and such. So very cool stuff. I really loved how they portrayed the Psycho Gundam in this episode. Just generally seeing the Titans in it was pretty cool. Again, they were wiped out pretty easily, but ultimately, I feel like the reason why they was to showcase like how capable Shaliable is. Because so far in this series, if you hadn't seen the GQuuuuuuX beginning, then you wouldn't have seen Shalia in action. And even seeing that, like, it's definitely not as exciting in that particular part as it was here. So seeing him kind of come in and just completely destroy the Psycho Gundam, which we'd already seen to be incredibly powerful, and he just wiped it off the board pretty easily. So that in itself, incredibly impressive, and it shows that Shaliable is a force to be reckoned with, and him piloting the kikeroga was like incredibly cool. That thing is unbelievably fast, which I certainly didn't expect because it's a pretty big mobile armor. But then you have it transforming as well, which again, just another really cool thing. And the animation looked clean, like it was a great transformation. Not gonna lie, seeing that, I wouldn't mind if Studio Kara did something with Transformers, because I think they got the transformations like down absolutely perfectly with that and the Psycho Gundam. So that stuff was really cool. My favorite part, though, when it comes to the mobile suits was the arrival of Xavier in the Gyan. When we were talking about episode 6, I did mention that I was expecting Xavier to get his own mobile suit at some point, and I was kind of hoping that they'd give him something completely different. But giving him the Gyan, it makes complete sense, because at the end of the day, he's like the Knight to Kystelia in this case, of which Maccabee was in the original Gundam series, and he had the Gyan. So, you know, from a storytelling perspective, very much makes sense. But the fact that the Gyan is probably the best it has ever been across any interpretation is awesome. Like, I look at that mobile suit and it almost feels the most like un-GQuuuuuX kind of look that we've had so far, where everything's almost been over-designed in a way that's supposed to look kind of humanoid in a robotic type of way, almost looking like Terminator-esque and of course Evangelion-esque. And you come to the Gyan in this series and it just looks like really armored, it looks like a proper knight, and it just stands apart as something that doesn't feel like the same design philosophy, but in a way that also still fits within the universe. I love the look of the Gyan. I need to see like a proper like design look at it rather than just seeing it briefly in action in this episode to really judge how it compares to all the other mobile suits. But as it stands, this might be my new favorite GQuuuuuX suit. But overall, it's pretty clear to me that this episode was the shit. Like, this thing was such a great episode that completely moves the needle in terms of what this series has been doing and changes the direction of where the characters are headed in a way that really sets up these next, like, what, 4, 5, maybe 6 episodes to be something really special. If they can execute it right, and from what I've seen from the series so far, I do trust them to do that. I just hope that it's not too rushed. You know, like, I like the pace that it's going at. I don't want it to go any faster paced than it already is, and I don't want it to add too much more into the mix, because I feel like there's enough stuff at play here where if you can pay off everything that we have going on, this could, I don't want to say go down as one of the best Gundam series, but it could go down as something that very much feels like its own thing, also pays heavy homage to series of past, and just ultimately delivers something that we can all say is a really good Gundam series. But those were my thoughts on episode 7 of Mobile Suit Gundam GQuuuuuX. Before I get out there, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you are a fan of mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. Also, like I said earlier, head on down to the comments section below. Let me know your thoughts on this episode, your favourite parts of it, your favourite mobile suits that appeared in this. And now that we're going to have Amate versus Nyan, who do you think is going to be framed as more of the antagonist of the series? Do you think it's going to be Amate following the ideals of Shalia? Or do you think it's going to be Nyan kind of more on the side of Zeon? Thank you once again for tuning into Mecha Chat today. I'll see you guys next time.